Welcome, guys. I am doing a pilgrimage. I've traveled from New York City, crossing the Atlantic by boat, and I went up to Edinburgh, and I've traveled slowly down through England and through France, and I'm continuing on through Italy, Greece, Turkey, and might make a couple excursions along the way. Final destination is going to be Jerusalem, which I anticipate arriving in June of 26, and this started January 3rd, 2026. So it's a good long trek, once in a lifetime journey. I've been recording some videos and some pictures, mostly just for family. I do apologize, my skills with video editing are pretty low, so what I've decided to do is just share photos I've taken, and a few videos. There's one now. This was as we're leaving New York Harbor, on my journey. So there's a few questions I've been asked to answer, and there's a lot of different things I wanted to cover, summarize my first roughly 40 days traveling. So first thing, just to touch on the itinerary, I started crossing the Atlantic from New York City to Southampton, England.
And the spawn made for manners.
Then I took a train up to London, spent a few days working in the archives there for research, and then I took a train up north to Edinburgh, spent some time in the city of Edinburgh, and then I very shortly there went on to the first leg of my trip, which I was very excited for, called St. Cuthbert's Way. It's a traditional pilgrimage route in northern England from Melrose, Scotland to Lindisfarne, which is in the very northern end of England. That part I mostly did on foot, which had its own challenges. After that, I went south. I went to Durham, York, Newcastle, Nottingham, Oxford, Stratford-upon-Avon, back to London, to Canterbury, to Sandwich, to Dover, to Calais, and to Paris. Now, this video reel, or reel of videos and images, stops in Paris. Right now, there's still just playing some images from when I was on the Atlantic crossing. This one in particular was a really nice image. This was kind of wild to me. There was no video special effects here, though it looks like it. That's just how the moon showed late at night. Now, the first thing I want to touch on is some of the surprises. My first big surprise was cost. Coming from America, my impression was generally, cities are more expensive and rural areas are fairly cheap and affordable. And in America, that's a good rule of thumb, regardless of whether you're talking about housing, renting a hotel room, or you're talking about food or drinks, whether you're getting a soda or a beer. So far in Europe, it's pretty much the opposite, and it's kind of weird. The city is more affordable, which was a surprise to me. It was particularly, financially rough when I was in northern England, because I know that northern England is very low population, and so I thought, it should be fairly affordable. It kind of got hit with a double whammy. It is more expensive in general, which I didn't really expect than the cities, but also a lot of the places I looked at when planning this before, because I've been planning this for 12 months before I started, a lot of the places I was looking at staying along the way were closed. So towns that would normally have 3, maybe 4 places to stay, because it was the off season, there'd only be one open, and they charged an arm and a leg for a pretty basic room, which caused me to change my plans. My plans were to go pretty slowly and walk most of the way. My hope was to walk from Edinburgh to Rome and Jerusalem. I'm not doing that. But I will be walking certain segments that are of particular importance. So the 2 reasons why I'm not walking that whole length is partially, the first one is partially the cost in certain areas. When I was doing the trip from Melrose to Lindisfarne, it was £100 a night I paid for a hotel in a small town, which the dollar difference is around 35%. So it's like $135 a night for a very basic room, no special amenities, no TV. You've got a room and a shower, and that's it. And it's not even a queen bed, luxury bedding, nothing. It's just a basic room. So that didn't seem feasible to be doing for that extended period. The second one was visa restrictions. So in the EU, they allow Americans 90 days visa-free in the Schengen area, which is just a term for the EU. It's pretty much the whole EU at this point. In England, it was 180 days visa-free, so didn't need to apply for a visa to go through the United Kingdom. And I was looking at the process of maybe getting a visa for one of the countries, but the process and the requirements, what they wanted essentially, where you're staying each day for the length of it, didn't make sense. So I was traveling, and, my thinking ahead of time was, well, what if I'm moving faster than expected? Or what if I injure my foot and need to take a few days off, right? I don't want to be booking every, place ahead of time if travel plans might change. So the visa didn't make a lot of sense to do. Just a quick comment on the images. This is in southern England after arriving. There's a place called the, I believe it was the Hobbit Pub. It was a very nice place in Southampton, also quite affordable. Also, a few images you just saw prior were at the Naval Museum. One of them was the HMS Victory, and it had the exact spot where Nelson was killed. So if you're a fan of history, Admiral Nelson, that was kind of neat, being, in the exact spot where he was killed. So another thing that surprised me was transport. This was actually a pleasant surprise. Public transport so far is pretty much everywhere I've traveled through in Europe. Even when I was in the countryside in Scotland or England, the buses wouldn't travel by as frequently, but they went everywhere. If there was a town of a few hundred people, buses would come a couple times a day, which was neat. It made traveling through England a lot easier. I was a little bit disappointed, though. The public transport, I was planning to take a detour towards Normandy to see the beaches. But the public transport that way was not as good. And so I would have to get a rental car or pay a lot for a taxi. And, with a trip this big, something that, costs that much extra, and also the the housing out there was a lot more sparse and expensive where it was. It just didn't financially make sense to be doing that. So when I was in London, I did work in the archives with a few documents, and it was kind of amazing, just photographing some of these. The pictures you're looking at now, I believe, are from the 1185 inquest of the Templar in England. So, yeah, this is a 800-year-old document I got the photograph, and we'll be doing some translation on. Next big surprise was food. Just in general, the food is different, and it's not as good. Like, honestly, seeing the food that people have in Europe, it makes a lot more sense to me why Americans are fat. We have a lot of good food in America, and whatever category you're thinking of, honestly, we do it better. Pretty much any burger you get in America is better. It tastes better than what you get here. And that goes for anything else. Even the sushi is generally better in America. I have been very surprised. I thought a lot of it was just, different portion sizes. Because, yeah, Americans also have larger portions, but it's not even that. I don't know. It's just, I couldn't tell you why. I can just tell you broadly, food has been better in America. And I don't know, might be losing some weight just because the food's not as appetizing here. The next surprise was the weather. I was preparing for it to be cold, near freezing for most of the way. I was starting hikes in the middle of January in Scotland. I thought it would be very cold. It's been surprisingly and pleasantly warm. I think the coldest I've seen until a week ago was about 39 degrees Fahrenheit. And, for the most part, it's been above that, typically 45 to 50 Fahrenheit, traveling through the United Kingdom. And if you're out hiking, you're moving the whole time, 45 degrees isn't that bad. I actually got to the point where I was reducing the amount that I was wearing because it would get a little bit, warm. Because I was dressing in layers. You've got underwear, base layer, and then pants, and multiple shirt or top layers.
You're more battle, Scotland.
I ended up just essentially wearing a pair of shorts and a shirt, and that was fine. So I was quite surprised by that. It has been very rainy, not just in England, but in France as well. As far as gear, one thing I didn't think much about until I was over here. I thought a little about it for leaving, but I just decided to hold off on getting some gear. Was the hiking poles. They're actually, when you're hiking, pretty useful. They look odd. They're a little bit of balancing, but it helps distribute the weight and the stress of the gear. So it makes it a little bit more tolerable hiking. Now, these pictures you're seeing now, these are hiking across the way to Lindisfarne. And I think now the photos are on the other side. Yeah, I believe these are from the island. Yep, these are from the island. So if you're not aware of it, Lindisfarne is a island in the northeastern corner of England. Really wonderful place. It's called Holy Island. And a professor of mine who had been there said that, if you go there, you'll understand why they call it Holy Island. And they weren't wrong. Just being there, it's a very beautiful, peaceful place. The island during low tide is connected to the mainland, and you can walk out there. And then at high tide, it becomes an actual island, and it's there's dune grass all over the place. There's it's right on the ocean, of course, so the views are beautiful, especially at night, at sunset, and in the morning, catching the sunrise. From there, on the heights, I could see 2 different castles, and yeah, it was very scenic. But also, it's Lindisfarne is an important historical place. It's where the Vikings first raided in England, and it was really kind of interesting being there. I was on the ridge on Lindisfarne, and I could see 2 different spots where it looked like would make sense for the Vikings to have landed, and I was pretty confident just looking at it. I could tell where they would have landed, the rocky side, and just next to the ridge. And it also made sense to me the ridge would be most likely where the original monastery was. Original monastery was made of wood, so we don't really have good archaeological evidence for it, but Durham University has been doing some digs there, and I've been finding some stuff that indicates where some of the early settlement was, and the ridge is one of the things they point out that might have been where the original monastery was. And to me, from what I was just seeing and what I know, that makes sense. It was kind of wild standing there and putting those facts I just explained together. All kind of hit me at once, just like, oh wow, this is literally where the monks would have been when they saw Vikings coming to kill them. So I've gone through, made a lot of effort to stop and see cathedrals in particular. Earlier, there were some photos of Durham Cathedral. That was the first cathedral I really was inside and spent some time in. And then just a few slides back was York Minster. Both very beautiful cathedrals with great services. So let's see. I asked you guys if you got any questions, and I'm gonna ask a couple of those now. If you have some questions, I'm gonna do the same thing. Do a recap in about another month. If you got some questions, just shoot it in the comments, and I'll get to it in the next video. So one of the questions asked was, what's the biggest mismatch from expectations so far? I think the biggest mismatch was English drinking culture. I had heard a lot, and it's in movies and talking to people that English love drinking, and it doesn't seem wrong. Like, they do love drinking, but it's not what I expected. Typically, when I had been in small town bars in America, you sit down, you have a drink, and you have a conversation with the person next to you. And that's what I thought it was going to be in England. The English are much more reserved. I've been a few times, I've sat at a bar, and it's lined up with patrons, 7 of them, drinking, and no one's talking. And, oftentimes they're old enough that it wasn't, because you might be expecting, oh, okay, some young guys just sitting there looking at their phones, but a lot of times those older guys just sitting there, drinking, no conversation, not looking at any phones, not watching any TV, just sitting there, drinking, and was very surprised by that. Wasn't always the case. Some bars, people were very sociable and friendly. But yeah, I was surprised just the way that people would drink on their own. I thought, for me, going to the bar was not an alcohol experience. It was always a social experience. And I guess it does seem like for the English, it is at least as much an alcohol experience as a social experience. I was also asked how seeing pilgrimage sites in person added color to my prior academic knowledge of them. I would say the first thing is, like I mentioned before, with Lindisfarne, it's really hard to explain in a way to capture how beautiful a place like that is. The pictures don't do it justice. It's a combination of, the sounds, the sights, and the smells. It is an island right on the coast. There's the smell of the ocean, and fortunately, it's not too strong. Right, you're not getting that dead fish gut scent. It's like the ocean breeze smell. You can hear the waves slapping against the shore. And then, a nice cool breeze. And there's also all that history right there. I was standing on that ridge, the remnants of an early monastery. And when that was destroyed, the Normans later rebuilt one just a stone's throw away from it. So there's a lot of history there, and those things together, I can't really explain in a way that I think is going to convey it. But I would suggest if anyone has an opportunity when they're in northern England, definitely go to Lindisfarne and definitely stay there for a couple days. It is very nice. It's one of the few places I'm normally always up and moving. Even if I'm sitting down, it's, this, that, the other. That's one of the few places in the world I really felt perfectly happy to sit down and do nothing. To act like an Englishman sitting at a bar. The other thing I would say that was different, or I guess added, was seeing or even participating in worship services at a cathedral. A lot of times, you see castles, cathedrals, and, these are relics of the past. And it's oftentimes treated that way. I'm not kidding when I say in Paris, Notre Dame, it is treated like that. It is primarily a tourist site. But a lot of these cathedrals are still active. People still pray there. They still have worship services, and it's not the same as the worship service we have in America. And it's very beautiful. Most of them, at least when I was in England, had a choir that would come out for the services. And yeah, they were very skilled. So seeing something that, seems like a relic, still alive in its use, that seemed to me to convey a better idea of what the location was in history. It's not just a series of stones. I heard once there was someone was describing cathedrals, and why build them, right? And they said the purpose was to draw your eyes upwards to heaven. And if you ever go to a cathedral, that that happens. Pretty much everyone, their heads immediately turn and look up just because there's such a massive cavity, so much space above you. And very typically, cathedrals will have beautifully painted ceilings. Let's see. Someone else asked, who were the friendliest people I met? So I've been in Scotland, England, France, and I'm now in Italy. The Scots were by far the most friendly. The Scottish were very friendly. Speaking of which, I just mentioned the Scottish. The photos you're looking at now and the few prior, it won't look like it now, but this is where William Wallace was executed. So if you ever watched Braveheart, this is where that scene happened in real history. Another question that you guys asked, what was the best part of the trip? I find myself saying, again, if you guys have been paying attention so far, you might have a good guess, and yeah, it's Lindisfarne. It's just so beautiful. Like I said, it's one of the few places in life where I could sit down and just be happy, enjoying things as they are, right? Without feeling the need to go get up, do something, right? Or, it's not even just a physical thing, without mind racing. A lot of times I've found just myself that if I'm sitting and I'm not doing anything, my mind will do something. It will think about certain things, then I'll become curious and look something up. Lindisfarne, I was perfectly happy just to sit and enjoy the breeze and look out the beautiful views. So yeah, you don't see that often. I mentioned before a bit about Notre Dame, and I honestly feel I think going to Notre Dame was one of the worst parts of the trip. So I had the first cathedral I went to was Durham Cathedral, and I saw that there were services there, so I decided to attend some, and I was in town for a couple of days, and after I attended one, I actually really wanted to attend a few more, so I attended a few while I was there. And they were very beautiful services. But, I also want to mention just, I've attended services at plenty of cathedrals along the way, and I did attend a service in Notre Dame. It's a bit different, attending a service in another language. But I think you can still appreciate large parts of it. And especially if there's, a musical element to the worship, that is enjoyable if you don't understand it. But Notre Dame was different because there were less people at the worship, and the tourism didn't stop when the worship started. So other places, Durham Cathedral, York Minster, and Reims, etc. They were tourist locations. Tourists came in, but they weren't welcome during worship services, right? It was closed to tourists during worship services, and then tourists were welcome again. At Notre Dame, they didn't. And so there were maybe 80 people attending the worship service. And I think there were at least 1,000, somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 tourists going around the cathedral as the service was happening. And, they said on the speakers in multiple languages, please be quiet and respect the service. But it was really weird because, that would work for about 10 seconds. And then tourists would go on having their conversations, right? And so, during the service, even though I didn't understand a lot of it, there were parts they did in Latin, parts they did in English. And so I did understand a fair chunk of it. But, the priest was about as audible to me as the murmur of tourists. So, I don't know, that just felt very weird. It didn't feel like it was a place of worship that was welcoming tourists. It felt like a tourist location that begrudgingly allowed worshipers, if that makes sense. So that didn't quite sit as well with me. I don't know. Just didn't feel right. It felt backwards. Let's see. There's a funny little bit when I was crossing the English Channel. I arrived and one of you guys asked if I'm swimming. Of course, no. I took a ferry. I joked with some Frenchmen when I got in Calais that I was the first in my family to be in France since 1944, and I thought I was pretty funny, and none of them laughed. So, the pictures you're looking at now, these are Versailles. I spent a couple days there. Versailles was very beautiful. That was another place. Wasn't actually as nice as Lindisfarne, but I think I could be happy just walking through the gardens and the forest there for a long time. It was very, very beautiful. And just dialing back I was asked about the worst part, Notre Dame's there. My pack might be the worst part. I'm not quite sure about that. So I have a bunch of gear. It's mostly clothes, but it's about 30 pounds, maybe 35 pounds. And yeah, it's not too bad walking around for a day. It's been funny when I go to certain places, security wants to check bags, and I've got everything. I've got all the clothes and my laptop, everything I need. So it's a little bit of a bother for security. And it's been funny when I've stayed at a hotel, asked them to hold my bag since the rooms weren't open. They agreed, and most of the people were very surprised at how heavy the bag was. And struggled with it, which was kind of just funny to me. But during a regular day, it's not much of an issue, but during long days where I'm wearing the pack, it does get pretty heavy by the end of the day. I have been looking at ways to just drop stuff and get rid of things. I've thrown out a few things just because there's, you look at it and it's just like, okay, is it worth keeping the weight? And, the utility of the item's not worth the weight. And then, also I look, is this valuable enough to be worth sending home? And almost never is it. So, just throw it out. Let's see. So, one of the things that's really neat is working in the archives. I worked with some documents at the British National Archives, but I also went to Oxford to look at some of the Templar documents they have there. The research side of it, my research has been a little bit rough. What I'm trying to research is the connection between the religious military orders. So the most famous is the Templar, but it's also the Hospitaller Knights, the Knights of St. George, and there's a few other ones. There's a Spanish one in particular. The name escapes me, but there's multiple military orders, and I was trying to look in particular at their role with pilgrimage in the West, because the big pilgrimage everyone's familiar with or heard of is to Jerusalem, but there's a lot of smaller pilgrimages that most medieval pilgrims would have done. They would have traveled, if you were living in northern England and you were an everyday person, you couldn't afford most likely to go to Jerusalem. It is a long journey on foot and it costs money. But what people could do is travel to a shrine of a saint a few days away. So that would have been probably 99% of medieval pilgrimages. And so I was just curious, what was the role of the military orders in that? So information so far has been fairly thin, but I'm still working on that research. These are still photos of Versailles. Something funny happened on the way. So a friend of mine asked me, he said, if you're going along this pilgrimage, there's just one thing I want you to do. I want you to go to the town of Sandwich, where the Earl of Sandwich lived, and get a sandwich at the sandwich shop. So I got the Earl of Sandwich sandwich at the sandwich shop in Sandwich, which was, I don't know, it's weird, but a little bit funny. So I did that. So someone else has asked about, I guess, social stuff along the way. I found it pretty easy to make friends. On the boat, Lindisfarne Crossing in Calais and in London, it's been pretty easy to make friends. I'm quite used in life to moving, right? So being sociable in a new area is pretty easy for me, and it's been pretty easy to get along. There's a few people I've added as contacts along the way, and I guess one of the rough things is just oftentimes, if I'm staying in a town for 1 or 2 days, I don't have a lot of chance really to connect and meet up again. So it is a little bit unfortunate. You make a new friend, and then it's just you're just like, okay, well, I'll see you. But that's the nature of travels like this. So when I was in Reims in eastern France, it did start to snow, and I was planning on going south through southeastern France into Switzerland, but with the weather getting colder, it didn't make sense to really spend time around the Alps. So I did get a bus over the Alps. I got some photos of the Alps. I think it should be at the end of this. No, it won't be in this reel. It'll be in the next reel for the next video. But I crossed over to Milan, and I'm in Italy now. Last night, I was able to get tickets to see the women's hockey team, the U.S. women's hockey team, play Sweden, and they absolutely dominated. It was almost rough to see. They won 5-0, and it was kind of sad. There was a little girl next to me who was very into Team Sweden, and as the game went on, she got more and more unhappy, and anytime the U.S. scored and I cheered, she looked very disappointed at me. I felt quite bad for her, but yeah, it is what it is. But yeah, that was very fun. It was kind of neat. I I went to a college that was Swedish Lutheran, so I knew a lot of Swedes. Met the Swedish king, so it was kind of interesting to see the U.S. play Sweden. But yeah, I'm now in Milan, and in a couple days I'll be heading on to Piacenza, down towards Rome. So in about 2 weeks, I should be in Rome. Now, more photos. If you guys have questions, go ahead, put them in the comments. Always happy to get any questions. Oh yeah, I hate this YouTube thing, but please like and subscribe. Yeah. I guess that we're supposed to spam you guys, telling you to like and subscribe. I don't know. I'm enjoying the trip. It's been good.